nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate. Seem like my homies was stuck in the hood. I just told them be safe in the state.
Our goal today is to go deeper into some of the things we discussed, because me and Terrell are not the most science literate people, but we did the best we could to explain the situation. So today with us we have Dr. Shay-Akil McLean. I wanted to say before I even read the bio, like that you had a decolonize all the things class that was very helpful for me. I know I've talked about on other shows, like I'm not formally educated in a lot of the stuff we speak on. It's just through study. But it's people like yourself that really helps, because your class just helped frame, which is big for me, and help organize ideas that I think I had going on in my head, but they were all over the place. And I need in some way to kind of like put the shit in the right boxes and help me understand where things went and what some of the contradictions were that I wasn't clear about. I remember we talked about in that class the differences between Black nationalism and Pan-Africanism and some of the things of that nature, and some of the reactionary forms of nationalism that were much easier to identify after that class. So I just want to appreciate you. I want to get that on wax and definitely say that.
Glad that it was helpful, because I remember I just wanted to share what I knew, what I like. I had been sitting on my godfather's porch, and he was just teaching me stuff and giving me readings and stuff, asking me questions, and then I'll come to him and ask and try to figure stuff out. We had study groups and stuff, and I was like, everybody needs to have this shit. Like, how can we make that happen? And
no, I mean,
I'm glad that I'm done now, because I can try to do whatever I can to make it more readily accessible and available.
Yeah, it was highly helpful, and I think we need more of that. I mean, I know now there's been a burst of podcasts and a lot of more, people making their syllabus and decolonizing their syllabus, whatever that means.
Right.
but back then, that was before that. That was like maybe when that started, but it wasn't. Again, 2014 feels like eons ago. But anyway, let me yeah. Let me read your bio, and then we can get to it. So again, Dr. Shay-Akil McLean is a queer, trans, masculine, and genderqueer man, racialized as Black, on stolen Indigenous land, an educator, organizer, writer, public intellectual, human biologist, anthropologist, and sociologist. Shay-Akil earned his Ph.D. from UIUC School of Integrative Biology's Ecology, Evolution, and Conservation. Shay-Akil studies Boisian sociology, STS, HASTS, racism, human health, demography, evolutionary genetics, and theoretical population genetics. He holds degrees in biological anthropology, BA and MA, and sociology, BA and MA, which he uses to study bioethics, medical ethics, philosophy of biology, population genetics, evolutionary theory, health inequities, and knowledge production. As a scholar, Shay-Akil studies how systems of human practices produce a differential distribution of health, illness, quality of life, and death. He is also the founder of the free political education website, decolonizeallthethings.com. Check that out. That's what we were just talking about. And the free scientific ethics website, decolonizescience.com.
Also, he is also the longest bio we have ever read on the show. So show some love for that right there. That is the longest bio we've ever read on the show to date. That's crazy. A lot of accomplishment.
I mean, if you got 5 degrees, that's actually a short bio. So I'm saying if I had 5 degrees, that would be the show. Like, y'all just gonna read all of that. You know what I'm saying? So that's actually that's actually pretty short when you got 5 degrees. But all right, so yeah, to just get into the myth, and just also like if there's anything else you want to share about yourself, or just kind of give people a little more context before we get into some of the questions. I'll just give you the floor.
Just know I have 5 degrees. The original plan was just to be regular and have at most 4 or maybe 3. I kept getting kicked out of PhD programs, and I successfully got my PhD recently from somewhere who couldn't get rid of me, basically. So like that's how I ended up with 5.
All right, you right at home then. So yeah, just to kick it off. So again, the myth is ancestry test determines race, and there's been this big explosion about taking ancestry tests, especially the last like 10 or 15 years, and it's and it's sold back to us. It's particularly African people that we're reconnecting with our roots, and we're finding where we really came from, and there's even jokes about how these tests should be free because this happened because Black people and slavery and blah blah blah. But as we laid out in episode 1, there's obviously a lot of contradictions here, and genetics, which was claimed to end the idea of race as a biological thing, has actually helped perpetuate it as a biological thing. So I know you've written widely about the kind of social construction of race, and how that's not really taken seriously enough. And in Social Constructions, Historical Grounds, that's one of your pieces people should check out. You argue contemporary critiques of race do not take social construction seriously. So what does taking social construction of race seriously look like in relation to DNA tests and the way that they have been used to reinforce this idea that you can find your race in your biology?
Well, so the reason why I made the argument that it's not being taken seriously is because it's literally the simplest way to take social constructionism seriously is to literally just leave it there. Don't take it to biology. Why are you asking your genetics what your race is? We just said it was socially constructed. So
Right.
take those words very seriously. And in that sense, but here's the thing, people cannot take that statement seriously because they don't know what it means. Race is a social construct, very common statement. Ask somebody 2 questions after they say that. What's race? Define it, please. And what's a social construct? Define it, please. They will likely either cry, act violently in order to save themselves, or sit in silence. And it's because everybody says that just after, because what is that a reactionary point for? I'm not racist. I'm not racist. Yep. I'm not racist. I'm not racist.
Right.
Nothing cannot demonstrate the social construction of race and racism. How was it socially constructed? Can you point to the events, the significant historical events that Oyeronke Oyewumi, she's a sociologist who wrote the book Invention of Women, is one of the readings that we actually did. In her book, she talks about the concept of sites of social construction. And that's one of the things that I refer to in that site in the social constructions historical grounds article. And ultimately, these significant historical events where people did wild shit, these concepts, and then instituted them through policy and ridiculous amounts of resources, and not to mention genocide, et cetera, et cetera. Like, those are the social constructions of race. Like, they had to make it. If you go back far enough, and that's the whole point, you gotta go back in time, which is actually something that's really, really the way that I engage with time and trying to understand this is very similar to the way I have to engage and understand time in the study of evolutionary biology and genetics. Because a lot of times people's general understanding, even if they talk about the past, they start with that background point or whatever you mentioned, and they move forward, and that's it.
Right.
Instead of thinking about here, now, how did we get here? And then back. So one of the things that I think is a big problem is people are not told what that history is. They don't know it. And it's one of the things that is difficult because if you don't know it, you're not going to understand what that means. You're not going to be able to do anything differently, which is the important point, right? So the theory doesn't have any meaning. I mean, you can't practice nothing. You can't do anything differently.
Right.
So so people aren't taking it seriously as a result, because they're, I'm going to find out about my ancestry and find out where my people are really from. Well, boo-hoo, not necessarily. Also, if you wanted to know where your ancestors were from, I would suggest that you read begin with reading Black Reconstruction, the first chapter. Du Bois spends the first couple pages listing off where the majority of enslaved Africans who were brought to the colonies in what we know of today as America, the United States, where they came from and when they were purchased. White people know where they got our ancestors from. What do we know about white people? They have receipts. They're called the colonial archives. They're hiding them, but they have them. You have to know where to look. The information that we want, this narrative that we have, that everything was just destroyed and we don't know anything in it, like that's not completely true.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know where to look.
Right.
So one of the biggest problems is we don't have that information. So we assume it's gone. There's no getting it back. But we think we're going to get some information about race from genetics, which is interesting because, and there's always this argument like, oh, race is genetic. Everyone's always understood it as biological. The word genetic was not a word. The word gene and genotype were coined in 1919 by Wilhelm Johansen. I lied, 1909. Added a 1 there, I don't know why. 1909, it was an article that he wrote where he also coined the term phenotype. Phenotype wasn't coined until 1909. All of that racist shit they did before then, they did it without the word gene or genotype or genetic or phenotype. Isn't that interesting? How'd that happen? So one of the biggest problems is people don't have that information for the history. So as a result, they talk about stuff out of time. So it's anachronistic. And it basically, they're assuming that things exist before they did. And they're assuming that racists, Euro-colonial racists, always had their shit together with regards to the facade they put up, which is not true. When I tell you, reading history has demonstrated that these motherfuckers did this shit off the cuff. It is so clear. That's the one thing you're like, how the fuck did they get away with this shit? You like, and everybody believes it. Oh my god, like it's wild.
They were shocked that they got away with it.
Right. So, and that's one of the things that I think is the most one of the most interesting parts about this. So, the social construction part, you really have to learn the history. You have to be a student of history. We don't really have much of a choice because we've already been lied to. The version of history that we know is the colonialist.
Right.
And as a result, we have to get it correct in order to understand what's actually happening. Because why are you looking at biology? And that's one of the things I tell people all the time, Matt added on to that. Like, the problem, and people get, it's not, race is not genetic, and everybody freak out. Biology is racist. Racism is racist, and then racism recruited biology to do racist shit. Biology stands on its own as knowledge, right? And it's a knowledge institution, right? Originally, it fell out of the general encompassing field of natural history. Biology wasn't really formally created as a discipline until after race and racism was.
Right.
The only form of biology that we have ever known on this planet is racialized biology. We actually do not have a colonial and technically truly evolutionary, logically coherent understanding of human biology, let alone the biology of other living things on this planet. All of it's racialized. And as a result, a good chunk of it is incorrect. And that's one of the things that's wild that we don't take into consideration. Like, the thing for you to be afraid of is racism, not biology. Be afraid of racism. That's the big concern here. So I try to get people to encourage, like, and it's hard because people like, I gotta read what? Like, shit is like this thick. So they be hot, which I get, but the answers are in there. They're not in your genome.
Right. So I think I'm sure you're aware of like the book Racecraft and the field sisters talks about how race becomes this race is always escaping the place that you put it in, and it ends up somewhere else, and then it gets used to explain things that aren't really happening. So like they talk about the example of I was discriminated against because of the color of my skin. They're like, that takes away, you know, like your skin.
That shit pissed me off. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
That ain't
your
got shit to
skin's
do with
not
skin
doing
shit.
nothing, you know.
It's not. It's not. And the things that I actually do when I teach to make this point in the class that I teach, and I've done this in research presentations as well. I'll pick one phenotype, specifically skin color, because everybody's so fucking obsessed with it. I'll start there. If you look at the evolutionary history of skin phenotype, right, and of the different genetics regarding that, you don't find shit about anything in regards to race because that doesn't make any fucking sense. The evolutionary history is grounded in the context of the ecological environment and the relationship that existed between the different living organisms within different communities at the time. That's it. And then moving forward. So when you look at what's going on with regards to the evolutionary development of skin characteristics and skin the genotypes and the relationships between them, because they're not, first of all, it's not one gene and then they're this color. They're considered polygenic traits. So it's a shit ton of shit all connected to each other. Very few things are one gene is this and that's not, very little, if anything works like that. It's not realistic. So what we find when we look at the history, the evolutionary history and development of skin genotypes, and seeing that, like, basically looking at how we got to the point to where people, quote unquote, look typically different. Like, it's because sunlight, vitamin D, and you can't have rickets and have a baby. That ain't gonna happen. Vitamin D, like it's shit that ain't got nothing to do with race and racism, because we said that those things weren't that. So why are we looking there? And not only that, you're not discriminated because of the color of your skin. You're discriminated because these crackers wanted your ancestors' land and they wanted some money.
Right. And skin just becomes
why you're discriminated, and they still want some money.
And skin just becomes a bad rationalization. Yeah.
And that is why, in the true meaning of when Du Bois said race is but a mark, that's what he meant. It's it's a distraction, basically, which is what Toni Morrison said. Right, it's a fucking distraction. They distracting you, and they got their hands in your pocket. That's exactly what it is. It's not, it ain't got shit to do with what you look like. And that's one of the big components of what we are supposed to be learning and taking from the conversations and the scholarship and the work that was done in like the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. They didn't already have, they was trying to tell us. If you look there, they tell you. That's not what that shit is about. That's the reason why Kwame Ture's book it says Black Power to Pan-Africanism, right? From Black Power to Pan-Africanism. Stokely speaks from Black Power to Pan-Africanism. And that was one of the things. He was looking through the facade. This is about land, relationships to land. This is about displacement. And that's one of the things, like, I try to get people to understand. I've talked about this for years. And you find it as long as you just you read and then look and try to have a sense of understanding how different power structures work. Black people who are racialized as Black in settler America, are displaced, dispossessed Africans. Africans are indigenous. First of all, how did they colonize the continent? They had to get rid of us first. They needed laborers so that they can colonize another continent. So they displaced a set of indigenous people, dispossessed them to another continent to dispossess and displace another indigenous people.
Right.
Then by moving us, the transoceanic slave trade, and this is very few people discuss it as this, it was a massive depopulation event.
Mm-hmm.
You took all them people from there. Not all of them lived and got to the place you took them. But most importantly, you took all the people from there. Makes it 10 times easier to do what? Take everything. And they enslaved them too. I mean, like, there's parts of the story that are perpetually, endlessly missing from the discussion. Like when people talk about this, like all the conversations are always starting out where like Black people just pop up out of nowhere. Like start the conversation about settler America and the settler colonial project here starts in Africa. And that is one of the weirdest things that I find about a lot of people writing historical analysis and stuff. I'm like, y'all need to be starting on the continent. Because if we were not, if they didn't get away with the transoceanic slave trade, they wouldn't have gotten away with fucking y'all up either.
Right.
And that's the unifying framework. You can't let the actual critique of settler colonialism and racism is a tool of settler colonialism and capitalism. These things are all connected to one another. They don't have to be, oh, is this working for this? No, they found a way by any means necessary to rob a bunch of motherfuckers and murder a bunch of people. Say, oh, it's not that bad. They're not even really people.
Right. And racism is rationalizations, because, like, again, these people, all of that stuff creates a reason why I can enslave them. They're savages. They're
justifying rationale.
Yeah.
It's a justifying rationale. If I can justify it, therefore I have a reason and a framework for why my actions are considered logical and appropriate. And the thing is that people don't understand is that we've already been tricked, because you think that you can negotiate somebody's life away. That's a problem. People's rights are not negotiable. The rights of the land, because the land has its own rights. And if you don't respect them, it's either what happens? You either set on fire, or there ends up being a release of a deadly airborne virus. You won't pay. So there are consequences for these things. But basically how shit work in the United States. Oh no, that's all negotiable. Like, is he a person? That's literally how the courts work. Is he really a person? Like, and that's kind of like one of the biggest issues and the problems within the first place. These are conversations about power. Everybody wants to make it a discussion about identity. This is not about identity. Because guess what? If it was, here's the solution. I'm white. No.
Right.
Shit work.
Right. Right. And Roberts, or in that same class we're talking about white by law, that goes over the whole history of how court cases and how people from other countries tried to argue that they were white and it failed. Roberts highlights one of those she takes from white by law. I cannot remember the brother's name, but he was a man from India. And
India. To argue that technically he qualified as Caucasian.
Yeah.
I remember that case. Those racial prerequisite cases are fascinating.
Yeah. And technically at the time, he would have been considered white, but they changed the law because he won his first case, and they changed the law, so he was no longer white. So that's what we were trying to say. The category,
changed it because he won.
Yeah, the category is always moving. Like as most Black people say, they move the goalposts, right? Like that's how this game works. So when we come back to genetics, and I know you wrote about, I can't remember the name of the piece. I was just reading it before I got on here. But basically how people talk about genetics like the last 500 years didn't happen.
The first chapter of my dissertation, isolation by distance and the problem of the 21st century.
Right. So it's like, how are genetics shaped by ecological factors, like we kind of already talked about it, such as slavery or colonialism?
Yeah. So, and this is one of the things that it's so funny because how I ended up coming up with writing this was basically reading tons and tons of history, documenting everything, taking notes and stuff, going to the genetic stuff, studying that and looking at what people are saying, their analysis. And I'm just like, there's a lot of shit missing. I'm really confused about, like, I'm trying to figure out what it is that I don't see and what it is that I am seeing in the context of what I don't see, which is actually like confusing as hell as an attempt to try to figure out what a problem is. But what I ended up doing for this specific paper is sitting with the contemporary critiques that they have of biological race concepts, or claims that race is genetic in origin or basis, So trying to sit with and figure that out. And one of the things that I ended up paying close attention to is the model that they use. Because this is the paper that ended up, like, this is the one that got the math in it. And the quantitative chapter where I took a sample, a sample of a research study that was already done. I took a sample from that sample and did a pilot study looking at the effects of looking at the effects of stress relatively on blood pressure, but most importantly, I was looking for different ways to measure racism through the contextualization, like by historically grounding, as well as grounding contemporary, like how people choose and answer questions about race. What is that telling you about their relationship to other human beings and the systems around them? We've been incorrectly understanding what it is. You're incorrectly defining it. So what I tried to do in that chapter is use the proxies as basically as a means for us to understand the environment, like using that as the basis for that. So one of the things that I try to do in that chapter is fix the thing I had the problem in the first one, which is the isolation by distance. People will make the argument that, okay, race is not genetic. Nah. Most of us anyway, like between different, there's a certain percentage of differences between races versus within racial groups. So we have this thing that we go to, a general, very basic statement. It's just over and over again, and all the scientists say it, all of the natural science especially, specifically. And what I was finding is that in most cases, when they were making that statement, the model that they were using was completely incorrect. And it wasn't allowing for a bunch of stuff that they said was happening. So they're telling us that, yes, race is socially constructed. All of this history matters. Colonialism and slavery. The model that they used to say, oh, it's only this amount of differences between versus within groups, the model, it erases time. And by erases time, I mean the processes that they're saying is predicting in the distribution of the genetic traits, right? The processes, how they interact with one another, it would erase any significant historical event that happened within about 500-600 period of time, which is very convenient for neoliberal. So it's really interesting in the sense to where when I was originally working on the basic stuff for my dissertation, but really my second master's thesis, because the second master's thesis is where I came up with my historical method and framework for this paper. So that's basically what I went through, kind of like trying to talk about in that piece. So regardless of whatever side of the argument people are on, somewhat like it basically somebody is pretty much saying race is biological, and technically people are agreeing with it whether they realize it or not. It's because either they're doing it inadvertently and their math is wrong, which means that first of all, as a basic strategy and tactic, you left yourself open for some right-wing motherfucker to get away with some shit and waste everybody's time. And Negroes are dying. So get it together. So is that, or the straightforward, race is, which a number of scholars have moved towards as an argument, as their framework, including, what is his name? David Wright, who's a population geneticist at Harvard University, and he's written some more popular pieces. He's one of the ones, like Dorothy Roberts and a whole bunch of people constantly, every time this motherfucker come out with a book and make a public piece, write some shit in the New York Times, they gotta get all this shit together and make a statement. Like so basically they're saying that the last 500, 600 years didn't happen. Because if those in that model, if those evolutionary interactions and processes are occurring, then we wouldn't be seeing the patterns that we're seeing now. So that means that something's wrong. So
something disrupted the whatever process they're even trying to claim, right?
They're trying to claim because they're trying to say, because in isolation by distance is a specific model that is used to describe the interactions of different populations, right, through time, but paying very, very, very close attention to distance, like the spatial distance and distribution, and then controlling what is occurring as people are moving different places. And then we're thinking about interaction, right? Because genetics is just about ultimately who fucking who. That's all the shit is. Is the nosiest version of anything. Because you find like, no, that's not their baby dad. That's all the shit is. I'm like, it's at a massive scale and then move backwards. So isolation by distance is basically an equilibrium model. And it's an equilibrium model because it describes two processes of interactions between genetic drift, meaning that from, like, say there's a small population, right? And a small group of them break off and move slightly far over in space. The general understanding is that while they can have the same general pool to some relative extent, because the pool of variation in this population came from this one, there could be drifts and changes in the distribution of the variation and the allo frequency, and that's going to be based on who's where, who's coming where, what's going on. There's all shit tons of possibilities. So the meaning genetic drift, so there are some changes that can occur, right? That's considered a differentiating effect. Gene flow, which is people moving in and coming back, right, and contributing their genetic material to the population.
Bucking.
That's considered a homogenizing effect, right? So make it like in homogenizing as in similarity, as in homogeneous, so like in that sense. So these two effects cancel each other out. They cancel each other out back to back.
Right.
So ultimately, that means that, and the thing about isolation by distance models is that once they reach a point of equilibrium, and they do, the variation doesn't change. So there's a couple of issues with the original ways that we were claiming to study genetic variation in humans, especially with the Human Genome Project. A lot of that shit should probably be done over. As well as our contemporary understandings of what we think the genetic variation is. Because first of all, you said race isn't genetic, then you looked to genes, looked at human genes, and then made a weird comparison between what 500 years ago 600 years ago looked like, and tried to make it now. It's actually very confusing. The way they got it wrong is damn near embarrassing. So things that I ended up trying to do and explain to people was taking a basic historical example of, if we look at how people interact in space, and then let's use an example from early quote unquote colonial America. Think about what they were doing to people's families. They were breaking me up. You have to actually consciously think, and it's one of those things. It's very visceral. There is no part of this work that isn't, in my experience, that wasn't exhausting. Because when I read like historical narratives and stuff, and I'm reading accounts of what I could see it at multiple scales. Not only what it was doing to the individual, but what it also does at a larger, heightened scale in regards to just human genetics and genomics. Because ultimately, the patterns that we see in human variation today, that we try to call race, that variation exists because y'all try to make race. That's what happens when you massively control mating across different groups, not to mention you kill people off before they ever reach mating reproductive age. And that's one of the things I talk about in my dissertation, the closing chapter, because there's a claim that the scholar makes about whether or not we should pay attention to the significance of the effects of racism on genetics and the relevance of genetics. And she's like, oh, it's only epigenetics. And I'm like, no, if you killing a bunch of Black kids, they never got to meet reproductive age. That affects genetic variation.
Right.
Yes. If it affects genetic variation, it affects evolution. The definition of evolution is change in allele frequency over time. It's as simple as that. You cut off people from contributing to the population, you definitely just affected the possibility of any change from that individual, because they gone now.
That are you restricting who they can repopulate with.
Exactly.
Oh,
and
catching
not to mention,
on,
so,
bro.
yeah, and that's one of the things that's really funny, because in that sense, when you think about how the racial framework operates in and of itself, because you have to basically separate what you think biology is from the one drop rule. You're saying that is not what that is. Like, they are not the same thing, even though we read it like that. And that's what Ancestry tests do. That's what these companies are doing. They're reading you. They're taking what they have, their limited information.
Very limited.
Yeah.
These motherfuckers they sample sizes and reference samples.
Terrible.
They don't have enough information to be able to tell you much.
Nah.
And then
they can't even tell you the
context
of who was where and when. They want to tell you, oh, you're in this and you're from that. Like, they're telling you that have ancestry from a place that was not named that then. They're probably got a fucking border split right through it right now. Like, there's so many problems. So there's the limited sample size as a reference point, not to mention the fact that don't mean that, fam. Like, if you want to know what your quote unquote race is, it's simple. How do people treat you? Like, you Black, I think you'll notice. Like, because ultimately that's what this is. Because this is about how people treat one another. Because if it was about identity, then I'm a white man. Clearly, my problems are all solved.
Right.
Think of this before me. But that's not what it is either. So they're basically taking people, the information they get from running these genetic and genomic tests, and they're reading the one drop rule and all these legal frameworks, all these other scripts. They read it on top of it based on their associations and racializations of different geographic locations. That's all this is. And it's always anachronistic. It's out of time. There's no context. And it also is based on an assumption that indigenous people, and by indigenous, I mean they are indigenous because a colonizer arrived. It's based on the assumption that indigenous people didn't move.
Right.
You ever think about that? That everybody was just ain't nobody ever going
nowhere. Everybody just was planning where they was always gonna be, and that was life. And then white folks came.
That's not fucking true.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Nope. That's not fucking true at all. And that's one of the things too I think is really important, because basically Europeans put us in this position to where they stick us this very, very static concept and understanding of everything. Everything is very fixed. And it's either one or another. It's a binary. It's what is referred to as
typology.
Dualism. It's a topology, right?
Yeah.
And that's not how the shit works at all. So there's a bunch of assumptions that come with every model that you use. Because the whole point of a model is you try to use that as a guidepost to help you understand what the fuck actually is there. Right? If your model has a shit ton of assumptions that you can't afford, bro, you can't use it.
Yeah.
Which is the whole point of the argument I made. I said, so y'all trying to tell these racist white people that they're wrong and they're racist, and your math is wrong? I died. You can't be affording to have your math wrong. Fuck. So in an attempt to try to address that shit, that's how I ended up writing this paper. You talking about about 500 to 600 years ago, as if it were exactly right now.
Right.
Like, no, that's not what that said. Like, so we're gonna ignore all that other shit they have. Race is socially constructed. If race is socially constructed, how are you gonna use a model that erases the social construction? We need that information. Your model cannot afford to erase it. And that information, because it's about what? Humans interacting in space, moving, changing, right? That's what you need to understand the biology. How people treat each other has biological consequences. If you treat somebody like shit, you should be shown enough well expecting them to get sick and eventually die. They're not going to do well. It's not a shocker. I was very pissed when I came to that. That was a very, very succinct, simple conclusion of my dissertation, which is like, I don't understand why all of y'all are shocked. You can't starve people, harass them, shoot at them, put them in dilapidated buildings, never give them the food they need, don't give them health care. Expect them to do well? There's not even a cracker on this planet that could survive that shit.
We discussed social political construct of race. We asked you questions on that. And now that we got that broken down, we will go into biology and race. So first, just what is biology?
So biology in a basic sense, and when it comes to fields or disciplines and stuff, I always start with the basic meaning of the word. And that means going to like linguistics and stuff. That shit is Latin. Biology, the study of life.
Period.
Technically, if you wanted to be painstakingly technical, a lot of shit falls into that category. Yeah. But in the more formal sense, when they say the study of life, that also includes like in a very, very specific natural history formal framework. So in using that language, that's from the fields that came before biology, how they generally understood and talked about life. And so basically it's the understanding of life and the study of it across species. Then that also includes biochemistry. That includes also the general theories and frameworks of how life evolved, which is, interestingly enough, a lot of that natural history stuff comes out of what? Religion. That's the reason why people go religion versus science. I'm like, no, them niggas is science. They like one came from the other one. Like, you know who made math? Like some of the most brilliant scientists, the majority of the most brilliant scientists who founded so many things that we do barely understand now were imams. It was Islam that established a good chunk of the first universities on the planet. So that's one of the reasons why I'm like, yo, knowing history will give you so much context to so much stuff. But one of the things that I think is important to understand is that first. So this is from natural history. So we're talking about the study of life, and it moves up in systems, up and down. So that includes genetics, that includes, also technically includes, some people argue, relative component of physics. Biology is considered more, even though it's considered a natural science, there's a number of different sciences that are considered removed, and they're ranked as removed from physics. As you get yourself removed from physics, it's almost like a sense of value or credibility. It starts to lower and decrease in different ways. So it depends. But this is also including the study of organ systems. This is that includes ecology. That includes the environment, because all these things are all connected. So the general concept of biology and our general understanding, especially when it comes to humans, is the body, right? Food we eat, stuff we interact with in the environment, the things we can't see, and then the things we do see, right? So a lot of the times we're under the impression that we know biology very well. We don't. We don't. It's really sad. And that's on a number of different levels. For instance, I think we know like a good chunk of like over 80% of the ocean. We don't know what the fuck is down there.
Yeah, I've read that.
Over 80% of that shit is not studied.
Yeah.
I find the ocean more terrifying than space. Because I actually think we know a little bit more about what's up there than what's down there. And I don't want them to do this. Like,
Nope.
just for context, it appears as if humans know so much. But that actually has to do with settler hubris. White people are just really fucking pompous and wrong. So that's how we end up with those assumptions in the first place. But added on to that, a lot of the values and metrics about who is significant, who matters, who has rights that have to be respected, who gets to do what, who eats, who lives, who dies, is embedded within the language and the frameworks within the field of biology themselves. So biology has been used as a legitimating rationale, or other words, it's used as a tool to justify different kinds of actions or treatment. And as a result, a lot of the political contestations end up bottled up there. And people end up arguing, thinking they're arguing about biology. You're arguing about racism, using the wrong language. You need to move on. So it goes back to the point that Du Bois made. Race is but a mark.
Right.
The issue is then for us to be concerned with colonialism, settler colonialism, and capitalism. That's the true issue. They're using biology as a means of a facade in order to continue this framework that allows them to get away with continuing settler colonialism and capitalism. And ultimately, we often are told that, oh, you know what biology, like everybody knows what it is. It's this and then it's this. No. Oh my God, no. And that's one of the things that's really interesting.
If you were just to ask, anybody, me, random person on the street, we'll tell you, biology, like you said earlier, is just a study of life, plants and shit, and that will walk over and that would be it. Study of your body and plants and shit.
It can get like there's xenobiology. There's like all kinds of shit. There's disciplines of biology that focus on space, shit in space. Like, so there's a whole and like I was saying, it can scale. We can go as tiny as we want to go. We can go down to the gene, and then we can move all the way back up.
Right.
We can go through organ systems, like all the way back up, cells, all that, go past all of that. Then you go to that one person that's in that chart, that one white person standing there. And then it goes into groups. And that's one of the things that's really funny, because there's this image that they used to always, they showed in undergrad sociology course, kind of like showing that scale of study, like starting with the genes and then going all the way up. And it was like, and then they and that was after they did a little thing on atoms and everything else. And it was always really funny, because I'm like when I try to explain to people what I do, I'm like, all of that, technically, I gotta look at all that shit. Like, because all of it is very, very much interconnected, because we are generally told that things can be simple, straightforward. It's either it's one thing or it's the other one. It only works this way. This gene does this. So little does that. Like, it's the one actually doing this shit, you'd be very humbled coming across a good chunk of stuff. You'll find out the shit is connected and you had no fucking clue. Some things can influence things that you had no idea. And now in the cases, you also got to look at the fact that if somebody is studying the interaction between, for example, genes, just the genes interacting with each other, because genes at alleles at different loci can affect one another depending on where they are and what gene they are. Okay. And as a result, and mind you, that's just not the two that are affecting each other. Those two are affecting each other, but also affecting other things and also being affected by other stuff simultaneously. So if you're looking at a study, research study has a sample, and they're looking at how this works and a sample of people. This is in the context of that period of time in their life that they studied them. Mm-hmm. And in the context of the variation that exists is a subset of the larger set of variation that's in that smaller sample. You're making inferences about everything else beyond them based on that small sample. Not a lot of information is there.
No.
Yeah.
So a lot of like it gets complicated in the sense to where you have to really slow down and go, oh shit, okay, what am I actually asking? Like, what questions am I asking? And that's, I think, one of the problems is, of course, the fact that, you know, the underfunded education system, which is people like, which is wild part. If you underfund anything, nigga, that's on purpose. Come on.
Yeah.
Like, not giving motherfuckers money is on purpose. It's
Right.
called robbing people. So and that's one of the things that I think is one of the biggest problems, because if they did not underfund that and we knew what they were up to, well, it would make this a lot more difficult to do, would it not? So a lot of the time, so in the study, the general overall study of biology, that includes so many things, all the way down to the study of, I mean, plastics. This shit on our phone that is not going to degrade for a long ass fucking time. This is going to outlive us.
Yeah.
Way past us. Like, so that's one of the things that shit is still a component of the study of biology as well.
Genes or not genes, but biology in genes probably too, but not as much maybe. But biology is just, it's a hodgepodge. That's how we tend to conceptualize it. It's just like you said, trees, and you know, it's like a science project somewhere. You know, it's you know, that's why I was joking about not being science literate. It's not necessarily because I'm not interested in it. It's just that growing up, like you said, it was not something like science was in a way treated as that's what's really happening. And then you have all the theory and stuff over here. But a lot of science sounds like it's just, you know, like you're talking about samples, and when we talked about the first episode with the clusters that they use to even create these categories, you know, like all this stuff is just algorithms that's the same. It's just making shit up and saying
bullshit.
Yeah, they're saying this is representative of this group. But like you said, the model doesn't actually hold up, then it can't explain said group. And a lot of science and biology, particularly biology even, is just that's particularly like you said, since the beginning of colonialism, it's always been racialized. So there's never been, you know, and then I mean we can even, if we were having a broader conversation, we could say the same things about gender and saying, you know, like all of this stuff has had the same kind of like effect of creating groups of people that don't really exist in a way we can materially quantify. So just for people again listening, I know we said genes is pretty much as fucking, so you might have already answered this, but like, but how are genes transferred per generation? We're trying to understand it specifically in relationship to this test and how they say that we carry these genes, and then after that we'll get to whether they, like you already said, whether there's specific types of genes. But how are genes translated or transferred, I should say, per generation?
So the transfer, so the language that is generally used in population genetics is a little bit different. So instead of using the language of just kind of like the transfer of genes, because then people are thinking about moving one thing to another. The language that's generally referred to is the meeting. They just call it meeting. Like how do gametes meet, right? The meeting of gametes. So that's basically the language they typically used to talk about mating. And then it's a conversation about random, then it's basically like, once again, we don't know what the hell is going on, so we're going to start with a prediction or a model. The majority of the models that they start with are based on very simple assumptions. So they go, okay, in this model there's no migration, so there's nobody coming in contributing new gametes or anything. None of that's going on. None of that shit. Control that shit. And then they'll slowly introduce basic things that they know are facts in order to move up from there, in order to understand how genes, basically how people are interacting in space and who's successfully procreating. So basically the foundation of population genetics in the first place is the real question, why do people look alike? Why do you look like your parents? But you don't. Like, you do, but you don't. Like, that's one of the core questions in genetics, because they're trying to, like, what the fuck is happening there? That, because we don't really know. There's a ton of questions we can't completely understand. There's people I've talked to, and they're just like, yo, me and all my siblings, right? It's 5 of us, and like everybody got the same nose but me. I ain't got my mama nose, I got my daddy nose, and don't nobody else in our family got their nose, and I don't know where it came from. And I'm just like, well, that's one of the things of genetics. You can get your great grandmama,
right? Which
facial
would
features
seem to
out of
really,
the blood.
which would I said this a little bit in the first episode. Like that's even just what you said would seem to complicate any idea of just like you're 70% African and your genome just
That's
traces
not
back.
possible.
You know what I'm saying? Like that.
Also,
Yeah.
it's very weird because the entire human species originated on the African continent. So we can start there. We can start a good like.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. It there.
Like, so 100%. Okay? And that's one of the things that I think is really, really interesting, because in that general framework, the one thing that we're all relying on is that Europeans are telling the truth about any of this shit. And then we moving on, acting like everything is normal. Like, why are we believing them? Why? You shouldn't believe them. Like, they lying. Not only that, is one of the things I find fascinating, because so this white person who stole my people and is stealing from me right now, and a whole bunch of other people, is going to tell me what percentage I am of something. You sure about that? So that's one of the things that I think is important too, in the sense of where the test attempts, and it's giving you percentages. Those percentages are based on what? That's one drop rule math. That math is from that shit. That math ain't got shit to do with biology or ancestry. And that was one of the things too that I was looking at in the quantitative part of my dissertation project, because I was looking at a set of candidate polymorphisms, so a specific set of genotypes a gene specifically that we know for a fact, based on research, is connected to high blood pressure in some sense. Like a certain genotype of this gene is connected to this X, Y, and Z. They're connected to controlling blood pressure in one way or another. Take those set of those genotypes, select them, and then get all the information for figuring out what the genotypes are within the sample, and then look at the relationships, the mathematical relationships that exist between those candidate polymorphisms. What's your racial identity? Like how people answer these questions, right? And then also, because I use 3 proxies, what's your racial identity was the question they asked, right? The other question that they asked is, when people first meet you, what race do they think you are? Which is a bit of a mind fuck, because the more interesting question, in my opinion, is to then add, because there's more information to be asked to get the interaction understanding of like where it's coming from. Because that the question of, when people first meet you, what race do they think you are? So this is your thoughts and reflections on how other people racialize you.
Mm-hmm.
So, because racialization is external, it starts externally. This is about how other people treat you, and then your adaptation to it based on the rules you've been socialized into, right?
Right.
And those are regionally bound, and they do change. People act like they don't, but they do. So in that sense, the question is a little iffy, because it's your reflection of what you think other people think you are, but it's still an interaction. So that's why I measured it as. The third proxy I use is the one they often use. It's ancestry. So based off of using a percentage, the one I specifically used was percentage of African ancestry as the proxy. There were cases in the models, because I ran, I think, 140 models. There were a good number of cases in the sample. Ancestry would have nothing to do in a model for predicting a high blood pressure, like high diastolic blood pressure or systolic blood pressure. Ancestry had nothing to do with it. But how people were treated, like their understanding of somebody else racializing them, that is what had a significant relationship.
So it's not just because we often hear, does it run in your family? You have your family got high blood pressure. You got
That's
diabetes. You're
bullshit.
more okay. Could you expand
That
more on
shit is
that? Because I
bullshit.
think
This is the
that's
reason why.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that and it pisses me off realizing this more and more as I study it, how we've been lied to, and I really don't appreciate it. Your high blood pressure is high because you stressed the fuck out. You're stressed. Do you know how many Africans come from the continent and move to the States? They didn't have high blood pressure when they were on the continent.
Wasn't a thing, probably.
They got it after being here for a bit. I know a number of different people come from the Caribbean, like move to the States from Jamaica, from Haiti and stuff. Had no history of high blood pressure, none. They'll have high blood pressure within a couple years, less than or less.
And you have models. You have models for that too.
It's the conditions. I don't like the, but people there are also people who study that. There's studies and stuff on that. And I remember reading some of them, and I know like the articles. I think I know where some of them are, the file folder they're in, and I can share that stuff with you when I get a chance to look for it. Because people have done research studies on it because they're trying to figure out like how that happened. Nobody ever talks about the context of outside of America. Stop believing that America's the whole world. Is not. Oh my God. The rest of the world. Start there. Because when you look at black people just naturally have high blood pressure. Where?
Right.
That's not always happening everywhere.
Right.
And it's important to have that information because otherwise you wouldn't question it. So what's really happening is it's the conditions. It's the conditions because the one of the people who was on my committee, Dr. Fatima Jackson, she's a biological anthropologist and scholar who's she leads the William Montague Cobb Lab at Howard. Her early research work looked at demonstrating basically the failures of the claim and models for the slavery salt hypertension hypothesis. The argument that it was a bottleneck from the transoceanic slave trade that created basically a population that is extremely sensitive to salt. It's not salt. It's racism. It's not fucking salt. The salt is a secondary effect because you don't need to raise your blood pressure. And it already raised all the fucking racism around you.
Mm.
You stressed out. You being robbed at work. You being overworked, underpaid, harassed at home. Kids to feed, nieces and nephews to take care of and feed, the neighbors down the hall, kids who need help, somebody baby needs shoes. It's always something broken. All the bills need to be paid. Your blood pressure's up. Understandably so. It should be. You're alive.
Right.
And they blame the whole thing is about blame. What does it do? Justifying rationales. They take the blame off of the oppressor.
Mm-hmm.
Place it on the victim. They're victim blaming ideologies. At the same point, it's a victim blaming framework, and it goes like it's you and your family.
It's how you eat. It's how you
do the same shit to some white people. Same thing gonna happen. Same shit gonna happen.
Right.
Do the exact same thing.
With that being said, I'm still allowed to put extra seasoning on all my shit. I just want to make sure I'm good to do that. That's all I care about right now.
My point is the dietary restriction is the secondary point. It's a secondary effect. Understandably, you can, but it's not because of the salt exactly. Not because of the salt. But like the salt didn't start it.
The salt didn't start
there. And I'm saying that as an asterisk because that don't mean you don't have high blood pressure potentially. People who do have high blood pressure, you got it. It's real. Please take it seriously. But it's not because of salt. It's because it's racism. Because and that's one of the things that we are constantly lied to about. We're told that this is about our biology. It's not.
Nah.
It ain't got shit to do with that.
Right.
This is not racism is not an issue of phenotype. It's an issue of power, not phenotype. Phenotype ain't got shit to do with shit. Y'all arguing about words that didn't exist before they came up with the racialized categories in the first place, meaning that we're looking at it incorrectly. Like those things don't even Like that thing didn't exist. Like, so we have to take that and going like, okay, so somebody lying, right? And kind of like sit with making sense of what the is going on.
Yeah, these concepts don't translate to all places at all times throughout history. That's something I always argue with people about when they talk about, when they come up with these kind of like racially deterministic narratives about how we got here.
Yeah.
You know, like from the beginning of time, white people were just jealous and they wanted melanin, and you know, like that's not how.
That makes no sense either, because white people have melanin.
Yeah.
There is one of the funniest things when it comes to like kind of reactionary Afrocentric kind of like Hotep biology kind of shit.
Hotep biology.
And I've been calling it that for years. Like this Hotep gynecology, which is always funny.
Hotep gynecology. Wow.
So
bro, write that down.
Really funny in the sense to where if you will shatter a motherfucker's world telling that nigga that white people got melanin.
Yeah, Nina Jablonski, we had her on the show actually. She made one of the white people who weren't lying, you know, but she made a lot of that clear. Like
she's the one. It's her work that I was referring to about the evolutionary history of skin color and phenotype, looking at the genes. It's her work. And one of my friends, Dr. Tina Lasisi, was her student at Penn State. And I think now Tina is still, Dr. Lasisi is still working. She's as a postdoc researcher there. But yeah, Nina Jablonski's work is that's go-to easily, just like nope, wrong. Again, just getting people to understand. I'm like, okay, so if it was about melanin, so people who don't have eumelanin, right, but are still racialized as Black because they have two Black parents. How'd that happen?
Yep.
So getting people on, like, because people are under the impression that like, oh yeah, just take the color, and everybody just looks white. Okay, don't act like y'all didn't see them Dave Chappelle skits, because you motherfuckers love his transphobic ass. You did see those skits. You saw him with white all over his fucking. He still looks Black. There are other phenotypes that are going to be utilized to racialize somebody, meaning that if one falls out, they'll use another one to categorize somebody into a group. With that being said, clearly it's not about skin color. Somebody's lying.
Right.
It just keeps kicking, because that's the whole point of all these different ways to racialize. When one fails, another needs to be utilized. Yeah. That's the reason. That's another reason why there's the great significance you were talking about. For example, in Dorothy Roberts' work, she talked about the Supreme Court frameworks that they use for the racial prerequisite cases. There's so much stuff, like one state you were considered a Negro if you had this ancestry or this number, and then another state it's a different law.
Yeah, the one drop rule, we said that in the first episode. The one drop rule wasn't even the same in every state.
It wasn't, and not only that, it was not one of the biggest, most important components to pay close attention to. When did that shit happen? Around the 1900s.
Yep.
They used that shit after.
Yeah, that wasn't
after.
Yeah.
That's the whole significance of the importance of Black Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
Du Bois is saying they recreated slavery. That's literally what he said. They just remade it. They kicked us out of it, said they was gonna let us in, and they kicked our asses out again. Like, basically,
this is the remix.
But exactly, like it's the same thing. So it's one of the things that I think is really interesting, because all of this becomes more and more apparent if you not only just kind of like, you got to study the history and stuff and like sit with people and have these discussions, because learning is a communal act. There's no knowledge that can exist without community. Also, humans are social beings. It requires two of us to make one.
Right.
Also, the two that's required to make the one, it took two to make each one of those. So you can just keep going with that.
Yep.
Because technically, when you look at the ancestry tests, they're limited in what the information they can give you. It's really funny when you think about the math, and it becomes a doozy. And this is something that Dr. Troy Duster talks about in a chapter that he wrote in the book Race and the Genetic Revolution, Science, Myth, and Culture. But it's so the test can identify only 2 of the 64 great grandparents that you have. So only 2 of the next generation back, right? After that, of 128 then can be identified. And then if you go to the next generation back, you can only identify 2 of 256. All of the variation you're missing, information you're missing.
That's a lot of information.
And that's each of the other 62 or 126, 254, they contributed just as much genetic makeup as the 2 that they do trace that are considered sex linked, either paternal or maternal lineages. So once again, not how the genetics works. And that's the reason I try to get people to understand this isn't about the biology. Right. This is a distraction. Like the biology is actually cool and fascinating and whatnot, but they don't even do all of that. Like they lying. They don't even do that. They lying. And trying to bring them a little bit more back to the history, but nobody wants to confront it. Right. It's very difficult for people to sit with. The biology is, I think, in a number of different ways, is what far more seductive, because it allows people to attach themselves to a tool or framework that they could utilize to justify a form of supremacy and hierarchy. Because that's the reason. That's the reason why reactionary frameworks like Hotep biology, like in weird orientations towards thinking that like Black, we are the original. Like all that. Please don't do that shit. No. I know it seems it's seductive after you get your ass beat and told that you ain't shit and everything about Black people and Africans is horrible. Yeah, everybody want to be a supremacist at that point, because actually, you read history, white people are fucking trash. We taught them to wipe their ass. We taught them damn near everything they know, and they treat us like shit. It's a fact. There's actually a great book on how Africans and the indigenous peoples here in the Americas taught white people how to wash their ass because they was nasty. The whole, example, the Dark Ages, right? The plague. It wasn't dark nowhere else for nobody else. The plague occurred because they just wasn't washing their ass. And they weren't washing, like they would keep bath water for mad long. It was just basic public health shit. And they're like, oh, are the gods angry? No, wash your ass. Wash your hand. Which is right now. What we dealing with now.
I'm about just choking this whiskey. You said they kept bathwater for days.
No, I'm serious. Okay, so you laughing, but there's a whole book on it. It's called Foul Bodies.
I'm not.
Yeah, nobody's disagreeing with you.
Bro, but it's funny as hell.
I'm just shocked. That is crazy.
But you right that history, although accurate, becomes this weird reactionary, kind of mythology.
Because it's not the solution.
Yeah,
that's not the solution. Because what if there's anything we should have learned from Obama, painting the White House black and drawing dicks all over it, it's not a solution. Negroes do not get free like that. No. Also, most importantly, if we are saying we are fighting for our freedom, right? Things that are out, it's mine. I'm not even trying to take other motherfucking shit. I just want my shit to be left the fuck alone. That's it, right? My freedom is what I'm fighting for. The ground and the basic understanding of that is not going to be in domination and supremacy. That's not the answer. Also, if we're really going to go to the point of the meaning of Afro and then centrism, if we're going to keep Africa at the center, how about we talk about the principles and the history, the pre-colonial history, the anti-colonial history of Africa and of the African people. Right. You ain't gonna find that shit there. It's very European, actually.
Yeah.
To think that the answer is to then say that, oh, the biology is this way. If you pay close, like reactionary frameworks like that, they always mimic colonial frameworks.
Yeah.
And because they recognize that biology is significant as a science, as a tool that Europeans use, as something people take seriously. Because of that, Then they create a framework for it and then an argument. And it is seductive because people are hurting. And I think it's important to acknowledge that.
Yeah. That's why I used to beat up on it a lot, but I was there once, so I tried to leave it because we did
it's a stage. It's
we
a
did
stage
it,
of development.
Yeah, we did an episode on melanin. We clowned it a lot as far as it being this superpower or whatever. But we were talking about Francis Cress Welsing's work and how a lot of that was extremely problematic. But
very patriarchal reaction.
Yeah. You've pretty much knocked this down through various ways, but is there such a thing? I just want to get it on record as a direct question. Is there such a thing as a Black or African gene or a Caucasian gene?
No. No. That makes no fucking sense. Nope.
Why doesn't? Is there such a thing? You said no. Yeah, then when we look at the human genome, can we identify race or ethnicity, which is just another way of answering that question? And then can race be determined via genetics? Why is the answer to all these questions no?
Okay, so first of all, humans are one species. Homo sapiens sapiens. Modern humans. We are one species. That's the reason why I try to tell people to go, oh, there's no such thing as a race. I can't stand when they do this shit. There's no such thing as race. There's only one human race. Girl, you just said there's no such thing as race. One. So that's just one. Let's start there. Two. Ain't no such thing as a human fucking race. There's a human species. Homo sapiens sapiens. They're like, because the whole point, this is about the relation between it's about categories, right? So these categories that we have of different species and living things and who is what, and in relation to what, and then we study the evolutionary relationships between those living things, right? That those classification systems come from Carolus Linnaeus. He gave us a good chunk of the frameworks for naming those.
Yeah, we talked about that in part one.
Yeah, Linnaeus, he's a piece of shit. Yeah. As most European scientists are. So a good chunk of what we are generally told, like what race, because people are like, well, what is race really? They'll do maybe the social science definition first, or what they'll do is they'll try to do the bio definition first, which is from the racialized typology. Which is really from typological thinking. Typological thinking, typologies are not evolutionary. They don't make any fucking sense. And if you try to use them as a model to try to understand human populations and variation across and within human populations, you won't understand it. You won't understand the damn thing. So
unless you just make up, you still don't want to understand it, but you can make up your own categories and then
you're just gonna be making up categories and just playing around. That's all you, and that's the thing that a lot of people, based on, and one of the biggest problems too is that people don't understand the basic facts that help you, like, keep you on a staying course when understanding biology and genetics, especially for evolutionary geneticists. They don't understand evolutionary theory and thinking. Variation, genetic variation, I'm not talking about diversity, DEI diversity, and rainbows and all that. No, that's not the same thing. Please don't. I always got to start that off as just not diversity like that. Please don't, y'all. Variation is the stuff of life, meaning that if there is not enough variation in a species, it doesn't evolve. Species that don't evolve are extinct. Everybody dead. Meaning that the premise for the existence of a living thing is variation. And then there are a number of different theories. There's all kinds of stuff behind arguments of different evolutionary forces and which ones are significant contributors in one way or another to creating variation. If everybody was just looking to fucking, first of all, that it couldn't happen. It just can't. It just fucking can't, because that's not how life works. That species would go extinct based on y'all racial model. It can't exist.
So you're saying So you're saying if everybody actually looked alike, then we wouldn't evolve and we would essentially be extinct? Is that a fair?
No, but like, because here's the thing: everybody, nothing looks alike.
Right.
Everybody dog don't look alike. That's the reason why when you lose your damn dog, you can go find it, even if they ain't got the collar on, because you know what your dog look like. Like somebody have a whole fucking litter of kittens, they don't all look alike, and even if they appear to look alike, there's always one with a slightly different spot. Nothing is the same. The idea that life is homogenous is a settler fallacy. It's another lie a white man made up. Let it go. It's not real. They told a lot of lies. There's a lot of look, but because it's a traumatizing experience, the people attach a lot to that shit. Like, I know this, and I was told, well, you do know you were told that. I don't know if you know if it's right, but that shit isn't real. That's like a species without variation is an extinct one.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's what I'm saying. What
it points back to is that ultimately this is not about what it points back to. Ultimately, clearly, it's not about what people look like.
Right.
It's not about differences in phenotype. Not at all. Because if that was the premise of the differences, like if differences in phenotype was the premise, and this is about a biology, well, then the species wouldn't exist.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like if it was actually if it was actually about that, then there just wouldn't be human beings. Period.
There we go. And that's one of the fascinating things about the evolutionary biology is because you can poke holes in their shit and their theory very easily, and it will always put them in a position where they have to face history, the facts of history, the facts of human history. You're gonna have to face that whether you like it or not. Like, because the reality is the concept, like one of the things that I appreciate about Du Bois's work is he provides so much stuff. So he goes across, his dissertation starts out with the study of the suppression of the transoceanic slave trade, which the conclusion of that study was they ain't suppressed much. Basically. Moving forward, when you look at Black Reconstruction, that first chapter is telling you where tons of people, a good chunk of the majority of our ancestors came from. Is there. And then you can trace that in colonial archives backward, But most importantly, another thing he provides, and it was in an article he published in 1898 on where he also defined the concept of the social problem. He also provides some of the frameworks for the grounding for really understanding a definition of what Blackness is. What makes Black people Black, right? So what is that actually defines Blackness itself? It's one of the things that I think is significant because a lot of the times we think Blackness is phenotype that unifies us, right? We all look the same. That's what it was. We all look the same. We all came from Africa. And then you can easily shoot holes in that argument by just pointing to the fact that, well, the phenotypic characteristics they say that only we have, they're on other continents. Like,
yeah.
People don't even think about the fact that usually the way they racialize people, they're often wrong. They still rely on the information though. But Du Bois provides a historical grounding. And that's one of the things that I think is the most important because he argues, and I'm trying to remember where it was. What book was that? Where he had that definition. I think it was Dusk of Dawn. I think that was the book where he
that was his bio, right? Yeah, that was in it was in the 40s. He referred to it as an
autobiography of race. It is a fascinating book. It's actually one of my favorites.
Yeah,
I would say it's definitely one of my favorites. Let me see, because I know I have that. Like, I know I got that book, but
I think I got
it's
that
really
somewhere too.
Funny because what he does in Dusk of Dawn is basically provide a framework that will always point you back to historical relations, and most importantly, relations between different human beings within a larger system of power. And it's about, he basically says it's Blackness and slavery is about that grouping of those some number of Africans who were basically displaced and dispossessed. He points to the event, the site of the social construction of that specific racialized category of Blackness, a core event, it started with displacement and dispossession and then moves forward. That is what defines Blackness. So it's a socio-political category. It's not about, oh, y'all look alike. We don't. And that's not what this is.
Right.
That's not a reliable framework, because if people all looking the same, and which is basically what could be referred to as like homogeneous, everybody looks exactly the same, like phenotypic homogeny. We all look exactly the same, and that is what makes people treat each other fairly. Explain the way Britain has treated Ireland and the Irish. Explain explain the Nazi era in Germany, what they did to the Jews.
Explain World War II.
World War II. Explain.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, there's a shit. Well, World War I and II are both white on white crime. So
yeah.
that's one right there.
Yeah. I mean, 85 million people, you know what I mean? Like, it's just.
So, you see what I'm saying? Like, that's not what this is. This is not about, oh, you were different and we didn't know what to do, so we just killed a bunch of people. Oops. That doesn't make sense. And also, that's not what happened. You lying. Look at a map. Look at a map. Look at a globe. A good chunk of the motherfuckers are likely lying. They don't appropriately scale those things. But the one thing that's going to be correct is, to some extent, is location. Europe is a tiny fucking peninsula smack dab in the middle of motherfuckers that don't look nothing like them. You mean to tell me that humans just figured that shit out, that everybody didn't look the same 500 years ago? 500 to 600 years ago. Right. Really? You sure about that? That doesn't make any sense. And that's one of the things, like the stuff that we're being told, it doesn't add up.
No, it doesn't hold.
The definition that you want, that you need to understand, is always going to be historical when it comes to race and racism. Race is the child of racism. Race only exists as a system and status to perpetuate racism. That's it. Like, you looking in your genotype, you need to look in a library. You need to be looking and look. So, like, it's actually way more accessible than you think it is. It's just not as convenient.
Right.
And the thing about the ancestry tests is they basically recruit Black people in a sense to reproduce settler colonialism and settler colonial relations, in a sense to where it also produces this kind of almost a form of notion of biological grounded justifications for entitlement to to land that does not what that connects that to. Also, that you don't have entitlement to land. Land owns itself. Like, it belongs to itself. Private property is a European phenomena. Those concepts, we're not taking those to the continent. No.
Right.
This idea that now it's mine and I can go, that's not how that works. That's just neocolonialism. And this is a part of the neocolonial project. Ancestry tests are being utilized as a framework to reproduce the same stuff. Because that's one of the things I don't think people understand. They often, and this is something I was thinking about when I was reading Kyle Mays' new book, An Afro-Indigenous History of the United States. So he talks about Vine Deloria Jr. Speaking of the differences between the interests of people racialized as Black in America and the indigenous peoples during like Black Power and Red Power movements. Just kind of like the indigenous people, they're fighting for treaty sovereignty, right? Sovereignty and the recognition of the treaties, where Black people are fighting for civil rights, which is not the same thing, right? And that's part of the settler project. But it's also within that framework, well, yeah, they've been told, ain't no, like, okay, so we took you from over there and you're not there no more, but you're not us, but you're not here, but you here now, and y'all stuck, and y'all can't go back, but don't go back, but stay here, but die, but live, so you can make my coffee and watch my kids. And you see, None of it's supposed to make sense.
Right.
And I just one of the things I try to tell my students, they go, I'm really confused. And I'm like, sounds like you're on track. It's because you've been lied to. That's why you're confused, baby. It's okay. Like, not supposed to make sense. None of it adds up. The math don't be mathing. That's not the information that you really, really need in order to understand your relative position in a larger racialized system is historical and is socio-political. 1, 2, it doesn't matter what you find in your biology. It is not a justification for whatever the fuck you thought you was about to go do to somebody else.
Right.
It's not. It's not. And that's also a very white way to move through the world. Stop doing that white colonial shit.
Like you said,
that was one of the things, like, we've been well colonized.
It's one
it's
drop.
About colonialism.
It's what you say is that's one drop rule math. I think that's
it is. It's the one drop rule math. You can't move through the world like that. And that's the reason why there's a major significance of the importance of political education. Because otherwise, we have been taught to do what? To think like white men and to move through the world according to their rules and much like them and treat other people the way white men treat other people, right? And in a number of different ways, Black people were racialized in settler America, engaged with the political system and the overall other people within settler America in a framework of, I'm fighting for freedom. But in most cases, you find they're not fighting for freedom and liberation. They're fighting for what they believe is the freedom of the right and freedom to treat people like shit, like white men do and get away with it. That's what most people are fighting for. I want equal rights. What white people have a right, that nobody should have that right. That's the point. Nobody gets that right. Nobody has the right to treat people like shit, start stealing shit and murdering motherfuckers. Nobody can just go around spreading diseases all willy fucking nilly, chill the fuck out. Nobody does that shit. Draw a line, damn. That's the point. So participation in settler colonialism is not a solution. And biology is never going to give you the answer that you need. Not for understanding like who you are. You have to understand history in order to and that's all contextual. You got to talk to your elders, people in your community, find out whose land you on. Shit, there's a lot of stuff it involves. Genetics is not one of them. And I just saved you a lot of money because that shit's expensive.
Yeah, hopefully we saved, we said we would.
And also it's dangerous. When I say dangerous, this is what I mean. When you give those people your genetic and genomic data, first of all, you just paid them and they now own your biological data, boo. When you die, that's theirs. They own it.
No, so they claim that, hey, your data is your DNA is protected and all this. But like you said, what happens after I die?
African Ancestry makes that claim. Ancestry.com doesn't even. I don't even think they lie about that. I'm not saying
they just
African Ancestry. I'm not saying they're lying on record, but I think selling your information. There's a lot of ways.
There's no unselling it.
Yeah.
How you gonna unsell your genetic data? Because that's one of the things that's a problem. And this is something I've talked about as well on social media and different conferences and stuff, and written about it a little bit. But in regards to the issue of biological sovereignty, like example, everybody love to talk about Henrietta Lacks, even though they don't. It's not real much understanding around what happened. The issue is a lack of biological sovereignty. She had her children and grandchildren. Those people them motherfuckers are still fighting to try to get something. You know how much money has been made off of HeLa cells? Entire industries would stop if HeLa cells changed ownership, if they gave that shit to her family. That's the reason why people won't get that shit up. So that's one. Not to mention the fact that it don't belong to you. These companies can then sell the data to a pharmaceutical company doing research work. Oh, we're trying to design a new drug that specifically treats high blood pressure in Black people. Have you tried? one of the best pills that could ever solve any problem with regards to high blood pressure for Black people is the destruction of the United States. That's what you need to change, the environment. That's what's killing people. And that's one of the things that pisses me off about, like, so you doing, the race is not biological. I don't know where the fuck y'all got that from. You find out, all these studies, they kept finding the same thing. That's one thing, something Dorothy Roberts talks about in Fatal Invention a good bit. She goes through a number of different studies to see what kind of results were they getting when they attempted to do this. Like, what was happening? Black people won't respond to the fucking medication the same way anybody else would.
Yeah,
And
she's got a whole chapter on that.
Something, but you don't change the conditions of the environment that makes them sick. You can't solve anything. They trying to keep us running in circles on purpose. It sets it up so that we die too soon enough to be able to do anything about it, because they running us in a fucking early grave. Like, and that was one of the things that I was trying to get my students to understand in the classes I taught, and trying to get also colleagues to understand in a number of different ways. That is not where we need to be going. Like, I know it's cute and looks fun and it's got colors all over it. But I mean, because look, when it comes to marketing, you put practically a rainbow on a product, everybody run towards that shit in a number of different ways for different like colorful shit. It gets people's attention when they can actually see that shit, because some people are colorblind. That's the whole thing. But some colors people can't see. But it's distracting. It's a marketing ploy. And they lying to you because you think you're going to solve hundreds of years of abuse with a fucking DNA swab? Wait, if you could, you think white people would sell it to you? Think about that, though. Like, they wouldn't sell you that shit if it could help you.
Yeah. And
at most, you done found out you had a cousin or a brother that you didn't know you had. Congrats. Any genetic test would have been able to do that, honey. I don't know. Like, so it's one of those things to where we're being lied to, and we're being lied to systematically, and then they're selling us another lie, telling us that it would assuage the pain of the other lies.
Yeah. That's what I said on point when I was money, like,
save yourself from state surveillance of your biological data. Save yourself from having your genetic and genomic data in somebody's database to then design a pharmaceutical pill that they will charge you $738.92 for one pill for. And your fucking data was in there to help design it. So you see what I'm saying? It's a ploy. It's all a scam. It's a fucking like it's a scam, much like everything that has to do with whiteness itself. A colonialism scam. All this shit is a scam. It's not. There's some fascinating shit there in the genetic stuff, yeah, but that's not what that does. It's not race. It's not racism. Yeah. But you can do racist shit with genetics. So don't give a bunch of rich white people your biological data. Please don't. Please don't, y'all. I love y'all. Please don't. Use that money to buy Black Reconstruction, Fatal Invention by Dorothy Roberts. Actually, save that money and go get y'all something to eat. I will give you the books, the shit for PDF for free. I don't care. Use the money to do something else, please. Buy a blunt.
Help our Patreon.
Weed, like, just, that will address your high blood pressure right there. So, and that's one of the things, like, I think is really important for us to understand. We kind of have to really sit with and unpack how we've attached our egos. We've been taught to attach our egos to narratives that don't belong to us. Is that your story, or is it the colonizers? It's one of the first things you have to figure out in political education. Like, what's yours and what's not?
Right.
What's yours and what's the colonizers?
Yeah.
First step, decolonization. Like,
yeah, I think that's I mean, yeah, I don't really think there's anything else to really ask as far as on the test. I think if you still want to do that after 2 episodes of this, we've covered between this interview and the last one, we pretty much covered all of Dorothy Roberts' book on top of your research. You know, I don't really know what else again, if that's what you want to do, we ain't never here to tell people what to do and not do. That's on you, I guess. But I don't think it'd be a good idea.
Not gonna get what they're telling you.
The money.
Not gonna get what you're looking for.
Yeah.
The money.
Keep your money.
And they,
Right,
and I think they're lying to you, right? Like they're just lying to you. Like there's no pie that can break yourself down. You cannot be broken down into a pie. Like that's bullshit. Like we need to just kill that. That's
like who's 100% of anything? We haven't found any of that. Like that's the thing. That's the funny part. You can't find that. Like it's the funniest part about all of it. The notion of the 100% purity. Nope, girl, that's not how that works. Not to mention the fact that the idea that you can just parsing people into pieces and percentages, like we said, one drop rule math. Girl, that's just colonial math.
Yeah.
That's racist math. That's all that is. That's racism in fractions. Like you just doing racism with dividing like a denominator, numerator, like congrats. The fuck?
So there's a lot to digest with this episode, and it's one of the ones I'm definitely going to be rewatching. Like we rewatch all of our episodes all the time. Episodes that I might not be on, or like Ryan's not. We go back and watch these episodes, but this is definitely one that like is going to get a couple watches out of me. So I do want to thank you for being on the show and everything, and we appreciate you.
Okay.
We definitely want to make the statement right here. We definitely need to have you back.
I'm down. I'm really glad that y'all even invited me. This is a great discussion. It was a great opportunity to have a conversation that needs to be had in the first place. And I enjoy talking to y'all. Like
this was amazing. Like
I'm really enjoying myself.
This is one of the ones where I'm like, man, let me shut up and listen, because this is, hold on, bro.
Yeah, we gonna.
In my head, I'm like, all right,
I'm down to come back. Y'all just let me know when.
Yeah, definitely.
In respect to that, you want to be left alone. I'll let you plug where you want to be found at.
Like that.
Because I'm like, shut.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, we as a Negro in a surveillance state.
Exactly.
The at DATT Shay-Akil Twitter account, and also Hood Biologist, Hood_biologist for my Instagram, my IG. Always standard, always at this place, decolonizeallthethings.com. Never fails. As long as I'm paying for the subscription to own the site, technically. But and I have not missed a payment because I make sure that it's taken care of, because I want people to have free information and stuff. Also decolonizeallthescience.com. And I'm putting some stuff together now to revamp my Patreon, so that I can basically set it up to where I can teach online and stuff can be accessible to everyday people. Okay. I realized I didn't like teaching college students.
Cool, because I was gonna ask you if there's.
I like teaching a bunch of middle class motherfuckers. That's really what it is. All right, y'all have a good one. Y'all take care. Appreciate y'all.
All right, man. Peace.
Okay, fresh out the plane in a whole nother state. I'm trying to eat down a whole nother plate.